I saw an article in GQ. Wait, for the record, I don't read GQ, but the article was shared by this lady on Twitter with assorted commentary. Because I was feeling masochistic, a surprisingly normal occurrence when one spends too much time on Twitter, I clicked on the article and regretted it almost immediately. It was an opinion bit by Hannah Gatsby, an Australian comedian who apparently gained worldwide fame and acclaim, and also snark and derision, for not being very funny on Netflix. And she was apparently so unfunny that Netflix is planning to let her do it again. I guess masochism is a widespread condition these days. It's a part of GQ's new masculinity issue. This is the latest attempt to challenge traditional masculinity. Now, normally, this wouldn't be a big deal. Any man who is married or has been in a long-term relationship with a woman knows that it's quite common for them to tell you, at great length, how they expect you to act. One of the most important relationship skills for a man is learning to nod and appear attentive when you tune this stuff out. But this article is next level lunacy and requires a response. So she starts out saying, "Hello, the men." The men? What is that? That must be one of those things Rotten Tomatoes critics think is hilarious and literally no one else does. Anyway, she goes on to say the following.
My advice on modern masculinity would be to look at all those traits you believe are feminine and interrogate why you are so obsessed with being the opposite. Because this idea that to be a man you have to be the furthest away from being a woman that you possibly can is really weird.
Trust me, men spend exactly no time thinking about acting differently from women. We either act like men we admire or want to compete with, or act in a way that women will find attractive. That last one is a tricky bit of trial and error, but one thing that women tend to not want to go out with is a dude that acts like a girl. Anyway, let's get on with this exercise in self-harm.
Why is everyone so scared of not being masculine?
I've literally never been scared of not being masculine. Being masculine actually comes quite naturally for me.
If you consider those in power, those who claim to be leading the world at the moment, you've got a lot of hyper-masculine man babies with terrible hair and no ability to compromise.
Ma'am, that's one guy. Well, unless you count the British guy and the Dutch guy. But the British guy isn't really hyper-masculine, and the Dutch guy isn't really a man baby. Anyway, let's keep going.
These are the cool guys who are taking us all to hell in a handbasket they didn't pay for.
You know, I'm not a huge fan of the Orange Man, but things aren't that bad right now. Despite all the naysaying out there, things seem to be chugging along just fine. Now, I know it's not because of President Spraytan, because this is a free market and not controlled by the president. But I don't see the evidence of our impending doom in any of the economic results. Nor have we become embroiled in any new wars. But I digress. I think that's not where you're going with this.
So here's a thought experiment. What if you, the men, look to traditional feminine traits and tried incorporating them into your masculinity?
This article is becoming a train wreck I can't turn away from. I know I should, but I can't.
Women are always being encouraged to stir masculine traits into their feminine recipe. We're told to be bolder, speak up in meetings, exaggerate your skills.
Well, you should not do the third one because it's fraud. But the first two are good ideas. If you do more of those, your pay might increase by 23%.
So perhaps it's time for you, the men, to be more ladylike. How about scale back on your confidence?
How about no? Because chicks dig confidence. They will literally tell you that. Also, it helps to get higher wages.
How about you try not to act in every situation? What if you tried to refrain from sharing your opinions or co-opting other people's ideas?
We don't act in every situation, and we don't always share our opinion. But we do act when it's useful. Being assertive isn't exactly a weakness. And the world would probably be a better place if people weren't so afraid to speak up. I'd rather deal with people occasionally airing bad opinions than failing to share good ones. And I'm a little offended that you think co-opting the opinions of others is a normal man thing. Guys who do that typically get beaten up or otherwise punished. By other guys. Anyway, I'm not done punishing myself with this drivel, so what else have you got?
How about yielding to people walking in the opposite direction? Or even just attempting to see them?
Maybe things are different in Australia, but yielding way and holding doors and whatnot is a common courtesy where I'm from. I guess y'all just bulldoze through each other. And we attempt to see people all the time. And I'm pretty sure they do that down under, too. Don't y'all constantly say g'day to each other? Or was that just Paul Hogan? Anyway, there's only 2 paragraphs left. I can do this.
How about you try pretending that you're the least powerful person in any room, and that no matter how hard you work, you'll never be the most powerful. Walk around like that for a couple weeks, and then call your mother.
Not sure why I would ever pretend to be the least powerful person in the room. Mostly because I don't spend a lot of time thinking about how powerful I am compared to everyone else in the room. And the second half of that sentence is called a self-fulfilling prophecy. Convincing myself that I will never be the most powerful is a wonderful way to guarantee that I will never be the most powerful. If women do this on the regular, it may explain the wage gap. There's no reason to do this for 5 seconds, much less 2 weeks. Oh, and by the way, I call my mother all the time. Every guy should do that. Anyway, moving on.
This is the first time that straight, white, cis men have been forced to think of themselves as anything other than human neutral.
No, it isn't.
And that must be a difficult thing.
No, it isn't.
I don't say that to be sarcastic. I can see how it is a tough spot. It's not your fault. You didn't build this mess. You were born into it, like the rest of us.
Which mess are you talking about? This is literally the best time to be alive for everybody. Things are a bit contentious, but when has that ever not been true?
What I am saying is that I have empathy for you. And empathy, by the way, is one of the traits that women are most famous for.
It's not unique to women.
You might know it by its other name, weakness.
Reading people is an extremely useful skill. It's the opposite of weakness, but whatever.
But don't be fooled. Empathy is a superpower. And it's the only one that any human has to offer.
Well, we already established that I agree with the first half, but the last bit is self-aggrandizement. You pretend that women are better at empathy than men, which is highly, highly debatable, and you pretend that it's the only superpower, implying that women are innately better than men. Well now, I'm just triggered by your sexism. Well, I made it. That was painful. And I could read more of the Voices of New Masculinity, but I think I'd turn into the guy from Orange is the New Black and How to Get Away with Murder if I did that. And I'd also start to like those 2 shows, which would cause my testicles to shrink. This is wokeness run amok. Believe it or not, this type of rhetoric didn't start out as a bad thing. Originally, this comes from the fight against toxic masculinity. Now, I know this phrase gets panned by anti-SJWs every 5 seconds, but the actual definition of that oft-maligned phrase does include some pretty bad traits, like poor impulse control and antisocial behavior. Those traits typically describe guys who are either in prison or working on being in prison. Stopping guys from doing that kind of stuff is totally fine. But now we've gone off the rails and we're challenging traditional male traits, like the impulse to be providers or protectors. Things that might make us want to be assertive at work, for example, or hold the door for you. These traits aren't the result of years of oppression. They're the result of noticing the difference between successful men and unsuccessful men over the millennia. If men stopped doing this, we'd probably just have ridiculous economic decline, and men would all be incels. So stop trying to tell us how to be men, because if we did what you say, we'd all go hungry, and nobody would ever get laid.